Hello, everyone. Welcome to Game Junk Prototype, episode 97, recording on Sunday, March 6, 2022. My name is Frank.
My name is Sean.
And my name is Andrew.
And joining us today for a very special episode of Game Junk Prototype is one of the co-founders of Drinkbox Studios in Toronto, with talking about their newly released games, Nobody Saves the World, which we have all beaten. Welcome, Mr. Graham Smith.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you, Graham.
Is this round 4? Round 5? It's been a few.
At least four, yeah.
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 Excellent.
Pleasure to be here.
Huck, I think, just beat the game today. Is that correct?
I did, yes.
I've been sitting on it for a few weeks. Sean is also beating it. So I think we're just going to talk about the game itself, the development process. I'm sure we all have some questions pocketed about the game. Should we start with our thoughts about the game? Or I guess let's ask Graham, how's it gone so far? Has the release of the game been everything you wanted it to be? Review scores? where are you at with Nobody Saves the World?
It's a good question, Frank. Well, first let me tell people, I don't know if everyone's familiar with the game. I'll talk a little bit about what the game is about. It's a top-down action RPG. I guess you could consider most similarly to like an old school top-down Zelda game in terms of like the graphical style of the game. But the main hook of the game is that throughout the course of the game, you're unlocking and playing as many different character classes, but not just classes, but also like different. We call them forms. So it can be anything from like, a knight or a ranger to like a rat or a mermaid. We have like lots of wacky, bizarre ones that you unlock as you're playing through the game. And then also...
Can I give my synopsis?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Another way of phrasing it, which is what made me appreciate the game.
You're definitely better than Graham at this, for sure.
No, it's just a totally different vibe. I didn't know what the game was. When I played it for the first 3 hours, I knew it was like an action RPG. But when I finally hit my stride with this game, the way I viewed it was it's a Diablo game. Yes. Where you're not stuck in one class the whole time. And the motivation is to keep switching Diablo classes to keep things interesting. Because I've played Diablo 3, and by the end, I was on autopilot. I'm just doing the same things. I'm clicking here, going through groups of enemies. It's boring. I'm surprised Diablo is so popular. I think people who like Diablo like loot. I don't like loot. So I get sick of those games, and this game has solved that problem. It's taking the boredom of the gameplay of Diablo and given it multiple forms and different ways to approach similar scenarios without getting bored, and continuing to put in hour after hour of addictive gameplay. And look at your completion time and realize I've played this game for 30 hours and it felt like 12, which is a good sign for a game.
Very astute, Frank. That's exactly what we were trying to go for with the game. Like, while it looks like a Zelda game, you're right. It's much more like a Diablo style game because you're going into dungeons and fighting monsters and stuff. But what we wanted, every time you went into a new dungeon in this game, we wanted you to have a different gameplay experience. So the dungeons do things like they have different restrictions. So the enemies will have different kinds of shields and stuff, and only certain of the forms can break those kind of shields. But you can also pull abilities from other forms onto your current form, and you can customize them in certain ways. And at the same time as all that's happening, you also have quests for each form that you're trying to do. And by doing those quests, you're unlocking more forms and more abilities. So you're like, when you come to the front of a dungeon, what we wanted the player to experience was like, look at like what kind of the dungeon will tell you what kind of enemies are going to be inside there. So you'll start with and you also have this tree of forms that like you're slowly unlocking things through. And so you can look at your tree and see what you haven't unlocked yet, and you're like, okay, I want to work on this. I want to try and unlock the mermaid, so I have to play as this form. But I also need to be able to break these kind of shields, so I'm going to pull these abilities in. And I need to do these quests, and these quests require me to use these abilities. So what we really wanted people is to do like some kind of build crafting in front of every dungeon and go in, and then depending on what you pulled in, you have a completely different experience every time. So it's not like in a Diablo game where you're just going with the same abilities through the whole game. You're always changing your abilities, and it always feels different as you're playing through.
There's almost a micromanagement element to some of that stuff when you're looking at quests and how that's working, which I think is a great motivational design system. that actually had me try everything, where I do fall into situations where I just do the same thing over and over again. I was guilty of that a bit in this game, where I felt like the slug was a little OP for me with the slowdown mechanic, but and the fact that it's ranged on top of that. So I would use slug a lot, but I still wanted to unlock every form, and the only way you can do that is through very specific quests that you have to change powers, and they're clearly designed to encourage that. So I think that comes across very clearly in the game. I would say it's also infused with Drinkbox's trademark style and humor. I think that always plays a big role in those games, and I think it does it successfully. And I remember the initial video. I can't remember, was it part of like one of those Xbox ID at Xbox showcases, or
there was a demo. Yeah,
and you saw like the rat and all these different forms, and I'm like, okay, this feels like, knowing what I know about Drinkbox, everyone loves the chicken in Guac. And then I guess it's worth saying Drinkbox made Guacamelee 1 and 2, Severed, and Mutant Blob's Attack on top of this game. All great games. I think Guac, as I've said before, is the best Metroid-like game of the past 10 years. Is it 15 years now for that game? I don't think one's come close.
Hollow Knight?
Sorry?
Hollow Knight? You played Hollow Knight.
I have, yeah. I didn't beat it.
Yeah?
I've beaten Guac 4 times, though, so Guac wins.
All right.
And the idea of the chicken to me feels like it was an inspiration for the forums. Like, because in Guac 2, you actually take the chicken that was like this fun joke almost mechanic in the first one and turn it into a powerful thing. And it's like, well, can we make all these weird things fun and powerful?
Yeah, that's definitely true. Like, because there's like a bit of a Metroidvania aspect to this game too, right? Like, there's some that can go into water, some that can fly, some that can go through small spaces, like the turtle or the rat. So yeah, I mean, like immediately at the beginning of the game, we wanted to lock the player into a space that they couldn't get out of until they changed forms, and so the rat was like the one that we ended up going with. You have to escape through a mouse hole to get out of the first room. So yeah, definitely there's some like carryover from our previous games into this game with some of those ideas. Yeah.
I must say that I think the genius of this game, though, is the questing system, because it solves the problem with the skill tree. And, like Frank was saying, I'm the same way. I get stuck in what I like doing. I just keep doing that in like a Diablo game. They usually give you the option to respec your tree, but I never do that. Yeah, no one ever does that.
Yeah.
So this encourages you to not only use each form, but also try each move as well, and try them in different scenarios with different combinations. And that really gets you to try everything. It's just that little carrot on the stick, and it also is like a little tutorial every time. You don't have to, I know like probably Elden Ring is like, oh, just go explore and find whatever you want in the world. I hate those kind of games. I like people to tell me what to do. I also have never played Elden Ring, so I don't know if it's good. But I like that I can equip a new form, and it tells me, try this, try that, try this.
Yeah.
And I know that as soon as I try those things, I'm going to be rewarded. And I don't have to figure it out on my own. I really like that, and I think it's quite ingenious, actually, to do it that way, and to come up with so many different combinations and just so many different forms that work great, I think, altogether.
And the brevity of the quests. Like, it's not like a slog to ever do one that's not that much fun, and it might illuminate something. Oh, I've never thought about that before. Clearly, the designers have thought, oh, this is actually a fun thing to use together, or we like it, so let's make the player. I often talk about this with Nintendo games, right? Like, or me personally when it comes to design, being guided or curated through an experience. You're the designers. You tell me what's fun about your game. I don't want to have to figure out what's fun about your game. I have a lot of games to play. Tell me why this is the one I should be playing.
Frank's
and that's a personal opinion. People don't like, some people like, do whatever you want. I do not. I'm the opposite. But I think the quest system walks that line perfectly and having the tree incorporate all that XP. It just works. And I was pretty frustrated on the first dungeon with I was dying all the time. And I know there's the tutorial text. This is your you should, because you're locked into one form, and I'm kind of curious about that design decision, to be honest, about why you can't progress quests in those dungeons. But I'm like, once I kind of got it, I was fine. Because at that point I kept dying and I'm like, am I going to have to agree with IGN? Like, I don't agree with IGN. I refuse to agree with IGN on a review score. So they can't be right. I have to figure this out. So, and then eventually I just kind of got it. And as I kept going through dungeons, I loved it more and more. I couldn't stop playing. I 100%ed everything. I got every quest, every dungeon, every collectible, except for the New Game Plus stuff. And I was like very constantly compelled to keep going and unlock everything in the game. And it was a nice balance. I have to commend the balance in terms of, by the time I did everything was unlocked. Nothing was that much of a grind. And I played for like 28 hours, which it was, I know a term Graham introduced me to, is that I love and talk about a lot, is reducing friction in games. And that's like a huge motivator for Drinkbox. And I feel like this game had more friction than your other games. And like, how did that feel? I know that's a huge thing for Drinkbox, like playtesting, and there is some friction in understanding this stuff. So I don't know, what was it like trying to reduce that friction?
It was an extremely long process. This is like the longest project we've ever worked on. It was over 3 years total, from when we started to the end. And I guess like I still think there's some friction in the final game. I mean, you'll probably bring up some of the things that you have questions about. Like I've heard some previous shows where you've been chatting about some of those things. But some of those things were, I mean, the things that were still problems in the final game were kind of mostly like tough decisions where it was like the alternatives were a little bit worse in our minds. And, but yeah, I guess like we did more playtesting on this game than any other game as well. Like, I can't remember how many playtesters, but the game is 20 hours long. And we must have done like at least 30 playtests of people playing through the entire game. And, they were streaming it whenever they could, like we were watching on Discord as people were playing. And, so, I mean, we were just like bombarded with data. Like, I mean, you mentioned like the quests not feeling too long and stuff. Well, that's not how it was most of the development, right? There was always like some of the forms ability, like, the forms weren't balanced with each other. Like some of the quests were just too grindy. Some of the forms weren't fun to play because, their mechanics didn't feel good. And, so we spent like enormous amounts of time just like, iterating and polishing. And then, and because of the length of the game, like I think an average playtester was always coming in over 20 hours. It's like each iteration was really long, right? Like someone would take an entire week to play the game. We'd watch them streaming every day, and then we'd make our changes. And, a couple weeks later, we'd do another one. And so that loop was really, really slow. I mean, but eventually, like we think, we tried to work out all the worst of the problems. And I mean, in the end, there's a few that still stick with me, I think, and you see them in some of the reviews. Like one of the strengths that you mentioned, you like being pushed to different things and getting different gameplay experiences. Some people don't like that. Some people are like, in the reviews even, they'll say, "I really like playing as this form. Why won't the game let me just keep playing as this form?" And that's because that's not what this game is, right? So we can't cater to you. That's like, it's completely opposite of what we're trying to do. So, if you don't like that, if you don't like what we did, then sorry, it's not a game for you. But another thing that really bothers me is that I feel like because we're trying to teach people so many things, for other people, like maybe even some of you, it feels really slow, like the beginning of the game. So like it takes probably about an hour to just finish to get to and finish that first legendary dungeon.
Yeah,
and then
it's maybe an hour and a half when I got there or something like that.
Okay, and then another half an hour until we unlock the customization. So like if it's taking, and that's when the game really starts to kick off, after you can customize from the other forms. And so 2 hours to get to that point, that's like a third of how long Guacamelee was in its entirety, right? So, I wish we could have compressed that more. But when we did try and do things faster, people just became overwhelmed. Like, there's playtesting
a lot of
with
systems.
Yeah, and we playtest with widely varying skill sets of people, right? Like hardcore gamers versus like really casual gamers. So like maybe we catered a little bit too much to the casual side this time around so that people could get into it, because we wanted everyone to be able to beat the game, right? But yeah, as a result of that, I hear pretty frequently in all the reviews, people say that it was way too slow to get started, and I agree. I think that's true. Like the first 2 hours, even when I played through this game, I don't know, at least 10 times, and the first 2 hours is painful for me. But then after that, it's kind of opens up, and I can play the game differently every time, right? Like you don't have to use the same forms and same combinations. It's always different. So I totally agree with that criticism. But it felt like at the time that was kind of necessary. So yeah.
So a question I have, so we've been talking about the different forms, and I think you guys did do a great job of making each form fun. A lot of times, and I think we talked about this on a previous episode, but just, you unlock something and you're like, oh, okay, that's cool, but I probably won't use this, or it doesn't seem as cool as the one I'm using currently. But then like 15 minutes later, you're into it and you're like, oh, this is actually, I'm enjoying this. But I'm curious, and I think you just mentioned something about this, but like, are there forms that were like cut from the game because they weren't fun, or they weren't achieving what you guys wanted, or they were just a little too wacky?
Most of the forms that we started implementing ended up being in the game all the way through, but there's a big list of forms that never made it even to the implementation phase. Like I think the original form tree was something like 50 forms, so we got about 18 into the game. But no, it was more like, the way we would do it is we'd have people play, like, well, our team always played through the game too. Like we'd get everyone to play the game for a week, and then they'd send me all their feedback, and I would and one of the things that they would all send is like, what's your top 3 forms and what's your bottom 3 forms. And so the bottom 3 forms would always get a lot of attention. Like we'd basically rank the forms, and then we'd look at the bottom forms and then start to figure out why were those the bottom forms. Okay, let's figure out what's wrong with them. And like the mermaid and the ghost for the longest time were like consistently on the bottom, but eventually, they started to bubble up. And then even like with playtesters from external playtests, eventually when we were asking that question, like, what are your top 3, what are your bottom 3, we were always getting different answers. So when the consistency stopped being there, then we realized, okay, this is kind of what we want. Like it became more like subjective rather than like objective problems. It was more like subjective, which ones do you like better? There was like no major problems left, but
all right, unprovoked, I feel like I'm responsible to give my top and bottom 3 forms. No pressure.
Yeah, okay.
I'll wait, because I do want to say, I think one of the most interesting things about the game with forms is the fact that like the 2 most classic forms that you unlock first, like the warrior and the ranger, like typical RPG forms.
Yeah.
You would think people's like natural tendency would be to gravitate to things they've played before. It's like, okay, I'm familiar with this, I'm going to use this. I'm the exact opposite. I barely use those 2 forms. Those are in my bottom 3 forms. And I think that's like a testament to the design of the game. And like the weirder forms are the ones that I wanted to keep playing and experimenting with. And I think that's like such a good thing, because it'd be so easy. Like, oh, I played RPGs before, I'm going to use, it's like such a daring move to make those the first 2. I know part of it is, okay, people are familiar with this. It's a way to ease people into this idea. But, it's also like, hey, they're just going to play with those. Yeah. Although you have the rat first, which is a nice kind of palate cleanse before that stuff. But I'm curious about the form development. So, I mean, I'm sure there's a conscious effort to, if you make the forms all different, you basically have to learn how to control things every time. And you don't want them to all be the same either. They need like varieties, and whether you charge an A, tap an A, like all those types of like specific mechanics for each form. Like, what was that process like? Were there ever decisions like, should everything control the same and do different stuff versus have different controls per form? And somewhat related, how did you approach forms? Did you have the character before you prototyped it, or did you prototype mechanics with like some just random cube that is doing certain powers, and then you thought of what class would apply to that type of control and combat style?
Okay. So I'll ask you your second question first. Usually, so the forms would get implemented like one at a time. So I mean, initially we picked a few, and I think the starting 3 forms were 3 of the first forms we ended up implementing. So that was the ranger, the guard, and the rat. All pretty simple. I guess the rat was the most unique in that it had like a poison ability and then an explode poison. But then,
and you knew it was going to be a rat, right? Like you didn't.
Yeah, we knew it was going to be a rat because we wanted to trap the player in a space they couldn't get out of, and we wanted to give them something that allowed them to get out of it. So and we didn't have too many of those. It would have had to be like a swimming thing or a flying thing or a small form. So then after that, like after we had a few forms, we'd always look at the giant list of forms, and we would try and select something that would be complementary to the existing forms, because how you can bring you can mix and match all the abilities, right? So we would basically be every form of like our humongous list of forms had like 3 proposed abilities, sometimes more. But we basically try and find things that are complementary, and then we talk about how it was going to work. Is it going to how are these things going to combine? And so we'd pick them one at a time and implement them. And then sometimes some of the forms would have abilities that were just too either too powerful or not fun, and we would usually tweak them. Sometimes we'd completely scrap them. Like the horse is an example. The horse had a passive ability called Graze for the longest time. And what that would do is if you just stood still, grass would start growing around the horse, and the horse would start regenerating its mana. So you could get your mana back just by standing still. So that was problematic because as soon as people started discovering that, they would put graze on all their forms, and then anytime they weren't in combat, they would just stand still for a long time, waiting for all their mana to come back, and then they would hit a heal ability, and then they'd eat their mana and they'd stand still again. So they would just be standing there and do nothing for minutes. So we changed that to the one where you get more mana for breaking objects. So and that just that sped things up. So there was a lot,
but typically it was like a character idea first for a form, and then it was like, okay, what would this character do? It wasn't like we have a gameplay idea. What creature would match that gameplay style? It was the opposite way.
It was the character and the game and the abilities were always paired in our design list. Although
so when someone pitched a form, it was a combination of like character and gameplay.
Yeah, and sometimes we did move things around that didn't make sense. Like I think the ranger's ability is like you get mana for picking up health pickups or something, but that was on a different form before. So some of them weren't like specific to a form, and we found that we wanted to rebalance things. But for the most part, they're pretty themed to the form that they're with, right? So I would say it's more about the abilities than the form. That's how we selected like how we were gonna bring the next one in. What was your first question again?
It was of the idea of should one character tap A versus hold A? Yeah. Like how the slug is hold A to shoot, like. Should there be consistency or diversity amongst playstyles for forms?
Yeah, and even some characters, like when you're holding that'll lock their direction, and sometimes it won't lock their direction. That was it was really just like we wanted each form to feel as good as that form could feel, and when we tried to make everything be the same, it just didn't work. Like it felt unnatural. Or unintuitive, it's probably a better way to say it. But I know it's like some people did have some problems, like with why does this one lock and this one doesn't lock when you're holding down?
Yeah.
But there was always a reason. I mean, I can't remember the specifics for all of there's always a reason why a form behaves the way it does, and it's usually just discovered through playtesting. The ranger locks direction when you hold down, but like the mermaid doesn't, right? So and that's because the mermaid is much more mobile when you're holding down, right? So players want to be able to run away or like reposition themselves. With the ranger, we really wanted the player to be locked in that direction. So yeah.
I assumed it was making each thing feel unique to some degree, but I was just more curious. I bet there was a lot of debate on a decision like that.
And not always agreement. A lot of heated debates for sure. Yeah.
I have a question about the skill tree part. So right now, as it stands, the or I guess the form tree, the form tree just unlocks as you upgrade your characters. Was there ever any thought to unlock them in different ways, like some sort of quest-specific things, like complete things to unlock the magician, for instance? Or was it always like, we'll just have it unlock as you kind of branch out and improve each character?
I think like the way that you generally, I think there was some ideas initially to like have each form have a specific quest that they had to do, like a story kind of quest to get from their second last rank to their top rank. And eventually we took that out because it was just pretty big in scope. But generally, no. I think the way that we had it was like that from the beginning. Yeah, basically, we wanted each form to have like a ton of quests, and like what you were saying, I think earlier, Andrew, like the initial set of quests is like teach you how to use your signature move, your basic ability, teach you how to use your passive, teach you how to use, and then every time you unlock a new ability for a form, it's like you immediately get quests that teach you the basic. So first is like quests are tutorial, like a tutorial for the form, and then the quests are like encouraging you to customize in weird ways, and it feels like later in a form. You have like lots of different options of how you're gonna complete those quests. It's like, basically it's like you kill things with ranged abilities, right? Okay, well I have like a dozen ranged abilities I can choose from. So when I'm in front of that dungeon trying to decide how to customize myself, I have options, right? It doesn't have to be like a specific thing to do. So yeah.
I actually like that the dungeon tells you what's inside it, so you can plan ahead of time. You don't just have to just go in and see what's in there
and die.
And die. I also like on the whole switching thing. I like how you kind of capped it at like the halfway point of the game, where if you progressed a form to like a certain level, but you weren't past a certain story point, you basically had nothing left to do for that character. Now you could keep using them if you want, but really you're just gaining your kind of like overall like world level or whatever you want to call it. And you're not progressing any form stuff. So it really encourages to switch even earlier, which I liked because I think I upgraded, I don't know, let's say the Ranger first, and then there was no quest left. So I was like, well, I don't want to keep using this person even though I like it. I'd rather try to upgrade something else while I'm here doing all this stuff and killing all these animals or beasts or whatever. And I think that was really a smart decision. Yet another way to encourage the player to try out everything in, I would say heavy-handed, but like not subtle. I like that feature a lot.
Yeah, I mean, Frank mentioned earlier that when he beat the game, it was just like about the same time as he had finished unlocking everything, right? And what we were finding in playtests was some people, they didn't want to switch away, like before we put that in place where it was like you can't do any more quests for this form until you progress the story, right? Some people would just like, they want to max out the rat, they're just going to play as the rat and nothing else. But eventually there was a problem. Like some of the quests later on you just can't do, like use break shields of this type. Well, you don't have any abilities to break light shields for a while in the game, so you can't even do those quests. So we didn't want to give players quests that they couldn't do. That felt bad. And we also didn't want people to just like sit and grind in the opening area until they finish their whole form tree and then just plow through the rest of the game without ever unlocking anything. We want the unlocks to be happening the whole way through the game, right? So and certain types of people, they would have been happy to just grind that's the first couple of dungeons over and over, finish the whole form tree, and then play the game and not get any more rewards. And that didn't feel good either. So, yeah,
that's interesting. Like that. I mean, you kind of already have been talking about this, but like I have to assume one of the biggest challenges of this game was balancing, and like the variety of abilities that you can mix and match. And like you're saying, some people have different play styles. They want to grind. They want to max out characters and be super powerful right away. Some people just want to play stories through and not pay attention to that stuff. So there's a lot of stuff you got to take into consideration. And you guys are a fairly small studio. I have to assume that was a challenge.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, we always wanted the player to be able to make like really powerful builds where they could go into a dungeon and just like blow everything away, because that feels really good. But we also wanted, when they went to the next dungeon, that wouldn't work anymore. Like something would stop them from being able to do that, right? And that's sometimes it's like the type of enemies that are there. Like there was like a lot of people would rely on familiars, like put together builds that were just like, summoning zombies and rabbits all over the place. But then
That's me.
but there's an enemy that will take over your familiars, right? I don't know if you noticed, but like he puts out a pulse.
I noticed.
And
I noticed.
So you can't just use this, like something that worked in the last dungeon won't work in every dungeon.
It works if you just keep spamming that familiar button.
Yeah, or yeah, like I mean, there's a lot of examples of that. We had like the dungeon modifiers where certain things just wouldn't work, and depending on what the dungeon the melee damage is halved, right? So you're not going to use certain classes in that one. So we always were trying to think of things like through enemies or through the shields or through the dungeon modifiers to push the play styles in different directions. If you ever do go back to the game and try New Game Plus, every dungeon has modifiers right from the get-go, and the modifiers are much more challenging. So it's like trying to push different play styles as much as possible. Yeah,
I would say you guys definitely succeeded at that, because I did totally find that I was kind of forced, or I'd run into a dungeon. Actually, I found at the end, the last couple dungeons were quite challenging, but I think that was me trying to rush through it, and I wasn't really thinking it through of what I needed to do. I was just kind of going with my go-tos. Mm-hmm. And once I was like, okay, this is not working, I got to just slow down, think about what I need to accomplish this, pick the right form, and then I was able to be successful. So I think you guys really pulled that aspect off in driving the player in that way.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, and a lot of those combinations they become puzzles, right? Like and maybe that is frustrating for some people if they just kind of want a hack and slash game and they just think, oh, I'm just going to go in and kill some stuff. Some of those dungeons, you're going to get slaughtered. You got to stop and be like, okay, this isn't working. Try something else, which I really like.
Yeah, that was the part, like I struggled with it first and then had a lot of fun with it, especially with some of the modified dungeons where it's like 9999 damage and a few other ones like that. It's like, okay, this is a puzzle. Like I got to figure out the best build to approach this.
Yeah. And I mean, some abilities are like really key for those kind of dungeons. Yeah. Like you probably use the hardened shell, like the egg one for that 9999 dungeon.
I don't think I did actually. I think I used the consume. No, maybe not consume. The vampirism and another one that gets your health back on crits. No, the one you buy, the crit health give back one.
Yeah. My favorite thing to use is dodge in that one. I just like, because everything gets killed by your dodge, right? If you do any damage, it kills them, right? So you could just like, before they can even attack you, you can just dodge through them. It doesn't even use mana. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's a great like way to do puzzle solving, right? Where there's many different ways to solve a puzzle. Mm-hmm. I thought it was interesting. This is a total side note, but I think the last game Graham worked on at Silicon Knights was Too Human. And Too Human and this game are very similar to me.
What?
In that I think they both attempted to take an idea, basically Diablo, and bring it to a casual group of game players, and they went completely different directions. Too Human went like a 3D action game version of that, and the right stick, like it was trying to replace the idea of a mouse click on a screen, like indicating a direction rather than doing something. And this one went like kind of orthographic, different approach to the same idea. And like I think this game's better, but I just thought it was interesting. Like it's not done successfully very well, like unless you do exactly what Diablo does. So I don't know. I keep thinking about that. Like Too Human, no one seemed, how I said, hey, this game is Diablo, but you're switching classes all the time. No one even realized Too Human was Diablo for the most part. They thought like this is an action game with weird controls, and it's like, no, it's just Diablo with a controller and with a different camera perspective. And I don't know. I kept thinking about that for some reason.
We actually had loot in this game for a little while, and it felt like, and the reason because we wanted to like have ways to keep to encourage people to keep playing. Like I don't know if you beat Diablo 3, you said, but did you ever play through the seasons, like the supporting content and stuff? Yeah. So I mean, the way to keep people playing is like they add more levels and they add more loot, and it's kind of evergreen. That's what they call it, right?
Yeah.
And initially we wanted that of this game too, and we had loot in the game, but it felt like it didn't fit. Like it was fighting with. It was one too many systems that didn't need to be there, and so eventually that all got cut. And it was sad to cut too, because the loot was funny, like some Brandy's T-shirt and I don't know, stupid, shitty loot, but it was like it added this level of complexity that didn't need to be there, and it didn't make the game more fun. And so eventually,
I felt the same way about some of the armor systems and hilts in God of War.
Oh yeah, God of War. Yeah,
it just overcomplicated what was already a very nice set of systems, and it's like I'm thinking about way too much. And these numbers for how levels go up on stuff, like an accumulation of all these stats. Brutal.
Yeah.
Best game of all time. Get real. I didn't even include that in as a decimal point deduction last week when I was doing my 10 out of 10 feedback. I'm curious what the last form, the form you thought you might cut, but it finally came together, or like the last form that was like, okay, we finally got this form.
So, what do you mean, the last one that was implemented?
No, the last one, it was like, maybe there was one, it's like, this one isn't that great. We might have to cut it or replace it. And then it finally had like a moment where...
Oh, wait, you never said your top 3 forms. But, okay, so the mermaid was consistently being reported as like, we don't like this form from people. And that's the one that probably was the closest to being cut.
Mermaid is on my bottom 3 forms. So my bottom 3 forms are Guard, Mermaid, and Bodybuilder. In that order, 1, 2, 3.
Bodybuilder, is it because you don't like the delay on the attack?
I don't know. It just felt like kind of a melee class that wasn't that satisfying to me. I didn't dislike any of these either. The Mermaid probably gets a bit of a free pass here. It probably should be my least favorite form, but it's so liberating to get that character and being able to swim when you get it. So, or like that was the first one I could swim as, and I'm like, okay, now I'm swimming fast in the water. But I was not crazy about the tail swipe. And
I'm really surprised because it's very similar to the slug with its shooting.
I guess the way you hold A on the slug is more satisfying to me than the charge bubble with the. It's more of a charge-based thing, which I'm not into charge mechanics all that much.
Does the mermaid have a rapid-fire shooter too?
I think
you can tap. You can tap, but
you have to
tap.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The guard, I'm kind of glad I don't like that class. It was like it's kind of a typical, or form, I should say, type of thing, and I'm like, okay, it's cool, but I've done this before, so I just want to play the other ones. My top 3: Magician number 3, Ghost number 2. Love the Ghost, and Slug number 1.
That's interesting. I put together my list as well while we were talking. Mine is we have 2 the same. That's it of all the 6. So my bottom 3 is Rat, Bodybuilder, and Ghost. And Ghost. Yeah, I just couldn't really get into the Ghost, probably because I just got it a little later. I think that was the last form I unlocked. So I kind of already had a bunch of stuff established. And then my top 3 would be Magician, Necromancer, and the Monk.
The Monk was cool.
The Monk I found really handy with the default power being the Shield Breaker or whatever, the Smash, I think. The red, whatever the orange.
I like the lightning power that would target all enemies. That was really
that too.
At times too.
I don't have a top 3, but I'll say the Bodybuilder would probably be in my top 3, believe it or not. I actually like the Bodybuilder. I was using it for quite a while in the middle of the game.
Sean, you can say your favorite's Dragon. It's all right. You know.
Well, Dragon I did use quite a bit at the end. It probably would be my favorite, actually. But, like, I don't know if that's just because it was the end and it kind of... It felt powerful, like to me, it's like you unlock the dragon. It should be cool. It should be powerful. And it kind of lived up to that. So... but yeah, I don't know if so you guys weren't using Dragon that much at the end then, it sounds like?
No.
I was using it occasionally. I used it at the very end just to fly past all the enemies and get to the last boss.
I like the Dragon though, don't get me wrong. Are we allowed to ask Graham? Are you allowed to disclose? Will there be
repercussions?
Are you allowed to say your top and bottom 3?
Yeah, I go back and forth a lot. I think probably the Dragon and the Ghost are definitely there. Oh, Magician too. Yeah, Magician is probably my favorite, actually. I really love the Magician. The Magician used to get unlocked much later in the game, and we pulled it way down because it's like such a fun class. So we wanted to give it a lot earlier. The Ghost used to be like kind of in the middle of the pack for me, but my last playthrough, I fell in love with the Ghost. It just became, I don't know, I just started playing it differently, and I think when you first get that Ghost, it doesn't feel very powerful at all. But if you put the right things on there, that Ghost is extra powerful. It's really, really.
My only criticism with the Ghost is understanding the yellow expand mechanic. Like there has to be an enemy present to tap A, I think.
The Ghost was one of the harder ones to convey what was going on, because it has like you want to try and keep that circle. So, okay, I don't know if people who haven't played the game, when you push the A button on the controller, this circle appears around the Ghost, and it does like an area effect damage. So you have to try and go near enemies, but not get hit by them, and keep them inside that circle. And while they're inside that circle, they're taking damage, damage is ticking on them, and also a fear meter is building up on them. And then they can become feared, and they start running away from you, and then you're chasing them. So it's like this kind of push-pull back and forth. Like you're trying to get as many guys in your circle as possible, and then you're chasing them to keep them in the circle. And the reason you want to keep them in the circle is because the circle only stays up for a certain number of seconds. And there's a cooldown that's longer than that number of seconds, so you can't actually recast the circle unless you're hitting things with that circle, and then that causes the cooldown to reset faster. So you're trying to hit things as quickly as possible so that your cooldown refreshes before the circle disappears, and you can cast it a second time. And the second time it gets bigger, the circle gets bigger. So, I mean, it's even hard to explain. How do you do that in the game, right? Well,
it definitely did not click for me. Like I liked it for specific uses, but I did not know.
One of the first quests is expand the circle to the max size or whatever, and it's like it took me a while to figure out exactly what the rules were for that. So
the yellow, when it turns yellow, that means you can cast it again. It's just telling you can hit the button anytime now. And there's also on the icon in the corner, you can see the cooldown timer is ticking around. So when that fills all the way up, then it turns yellow. So you can put you can pull in like a poison, so you can be poisoning enemies when they're inside your circle, and and then when you unlock the ethereal ability, then you don't have to be as worried about getting hit by things, because you can just pass through damage. So you can like try and tap that to time with enemy attacks. So yeah, it's a fun class. Yeah.
I feel like we're kind of getting into the specifics of design right now for people, that haven't played the game. Maybe we should step back a second. And I know one thing that I'm sure Sean is curious about too, and I am, is like Game Pass. We talk a lot about Game Pass, the value of Game Pass. This game is on Game Pass for Xbox and PC, Xbox app as well. So what's the experience being on Game Pass been like for the company and the game?
This is the first time we've ever launched a game into Game Pass, and I mean, the story about that, like we had a different publisher for the game. We started the game, I won't say who, but let's say we developed the game for the whole first year with another publisher, and then that publisher they canceled the project, and not just our project, they canceled a whole bunch of projects at the same time. So they had like a change in direction or something. So we had like a year of development, and the game was still really early back then. But we had something to show. So we started looking for other people to partner on the game. And so we reached out to everybody, like, Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, other people. And Microsoft was like really interested right from the get-go. So we started talking to them, about possible like some kind of deal to do, and the Game Pass team was excited about it, and they made us an offer, and we made a counter offer, and they said, okay, we'll take your counter offer, but you have to put online multiplayer. And we're like, okay, we'll do it. And that's how we ended up in Game Pass. They were awesome to work with. Microsoft was really great. Like, they're completely hands off, and anytime we needed anything, they would, if we wanted feedback on a build, or we could send it along and get it from them. And the launch, I think, went really well. Like, a lot of people were playing the game through Game Pass, and probably, I mean, I'm not certain of this, but it might have also helped our visibility on Steam, because the launch on Steam was really strong, stronger than any of our other games launches on Steam. So, I mean, overall, we're definitely happy about how things turned out with Game Pass. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a few factors there. One, I think over time, Drinkbox has become like a very reputable developer. I think people know that now. And I think another thing, great job getting this out before Elden Ring and Horizon.
really.
Like there was no games coming out. You had like a perfect time to launch this game. It's hard to get a time that perfect to launch a game.
It was a bit of a scramble because we had decided we wanted to launch January 18th, and then Elden Ring announced they're coming out on January 18th, and we're like, oh fuck, okay. Then we moved to February, like third week of February, and then Elden Ring moved to February, and then we moved back to January 18th. So it's like we're just trying to dodge Elden Ring. Yeah,
it's a good game to dodge.
Yeah, I think that was a good choice.
Yeah, and when we moved it back, then it was like, oh shit, we have 1 month less than we thought we did. So we had to like scramble a little bit to get it out, but we made it, thankfully. Yeah.
All right, let's get to the hard-hitting questions. Okay. Drinkbox.
I'm warmed up.
Drinkbox. I mean, you're familiar with the term blue haze by now. You could probably put a blue haze behind the Drinkbox logo. Have you had any Sony fanboy backlash because you've gone to the enemy?
No backlash. No backlash.
Okay, good.
But a lot of people are like, on our trailers and everything, they're just disappointment, I guess, is more like what happened. Yeah. They're like, oh, I really want to play this, but I can't. So yeah. But be patient, people. Nothing to announce, but be patient.
So on the Game Pass thing, I had a question too about xCloud, because I actually played part of the game.
Oh, really?
On xCloud, yeah. It was a game that worked quite well for xCloud, because it's not like super precise timing required for most stuff. Mm-hmm. And I just found it was really convenient for me because it's a bit of a longer game, and just being able to jump in and out from, if I was upstairs with the old glap, if I was on my computer just firing it up. Yeah, I played a lot on xCloud. I'm just curious if that's something you guys had to put development time into, or if that's just something Microsoft handles a lot of it for you, or what's involved there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, part of the agreement with Microsoft was to do xCloud, and from our standpoint, it was really easy. Like Microsoft does do a lot of the heavy lifting. I think on the tech side, there's maybe some things we had to integrate. I'm not even sure about that, but like
probably I would think mostly like cloud save related type stuff. And
yeah. So we handle all the cloud save stuff.
Yep. It's all handled.
Okay, so
that's all handled for you with the development kit they give you.
And then, I mean, at some point in the project, someone from the xCloud team emailed us and they said, hey, here's our suggestions for what icons you should use. Do you want to make any changes to these icons? And we're like, yeah, well, let's change that one to this. And yeah, that's it. So it was like really, really minimal. We sent them some assets and then they did everything else for us. So yeah, it was really, really pretty straightforward. I haven't tried it on xCloud, so I'm glad to hear it was good.
Happy to report it works.
Yeah. It works quite good. Now, I think you guys actually had touch controls too, didn't you? I didn't play it. Like I used a controller, but I think I saw that you had touch controls. Is that right?
Yeah, the xCloud team did that. They did all that mapping for us. Yeah. I mean, we gave some suggestions on like where things should be and stuff, but they did all of that themselves. Yeah.
Cool.
So the elephant in the room, how did you guys adapt to the pandemic, going remote? Obviously that would have had some sort of effect on the studio, on the development of the game.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
So yeah, that happened like a year into development. So, and it was like, it was around the exact same time as the publisher canceled. That all happened at the same time. So that was pretty stressful. Like I remember we went to Canada Computers, which is our local, computer hardware store. Bought every headset and webcam that they had, and came back to the office and handed them out. And so we're like, okay. See you in a few weeks. And then
2 weeks to flatten the curve. We'll be back.
And then we used to use Slack in the office, but we switched immediately to Discord, and we started using Discord for our I don't know. I'm a little bit too detailed here, but every morning we start the morning with a full team meeting, and we go on Discord with all our cameras and just talk about it's like our morning scrum, and then then everyone then sometimes it's break off meetings or whatever, talk about design or whatever. But I guess I was really skeptical before the pandemic hit. People used to ask about working from home. I was always like, I don't think it's as good. It's better to be together. And then I guess I was really proven wrong because, we did it. We made a game. I think there were certain things that I think didn't work as well when we were working from home. I feel like productivity, at least for myself, is a little bit less. There's more distractions in my house. I have my dog bothering me all the time and stuff like that. But when I'm at work, I can be more focused. And then at the end of the project, there was some trickiness with dev kits and stuff. This game is also probably had the biggest QA needs of any other game we've made because of the size of the game, the complexity of the game. So we had a bigger QA team. And then if someone needs to be testing on Xbox One or someone needs to be testing on Xbox Series, it's okay, well, I'm going out getting a dev kit because not everyone on my team has a car, right? So it's I got to go pick up a dev kit here and deliver it there. Oh, I ordered dev kits they just arrived at my house. I have to go out and deliver them to 3 people. So I was out driving around the city a lot and doing stuff like that. And then our version control is in the office still, and our build machines are in the office, and the power went out or the internet went out. So I got to drive to the office and I had to waste a lot of time doing stupid things like that. But other than that, the development process itself was pretty smooth, I think. And I don't know that we're ever going to go back now. I think we might shrink our office down to just be something more of a storage space with a meeting room or something, maybe a couple of shared desks. But we've opened it up. The office has been open for a while now. If anyone wants to go in, and maybe one person will go in every 2 weeks, just because their building's having a fire alarm test or something. Other than that, everyone's just working from home, and it's worked quite well.
Yeah, I found the same thing. I've been working remote for a while, but with Discord in particular, it makes it really easy, especially if you have multiple Discord channels. This is not really game junk anymore. This is game development junk, but if you have a bunch of channels and everyone talks in those channels, you still get that feel of a game development studio, maybe even more so, because if you're on a big team and you're just focused on the programming or just focused on the art, you never really know what the programmers are doing or what the artists are doing or designers are doing. But with Discord, if everyone just posts in those open channels, you can see what everyone's doing and really have a better understanding of what's going on in the game, what everyone's working on. I actually think it might be better in that regard for transparency to see what all the teams are doing at the same time, which is actually really great because then anyone can chime in. It's kind of like having an open meeting all the time. So you're just what do you guys think about this? And then, it's directed at art, but anyone could chime in on that. And I find that really helpful, actually.
Yeah, I agree. I've had that same experience with Discord too. I guess the one thing that I miss about the office is sometimes people are working on cool stuff and you're walking around and you just glance over their shoulder and you're like, oh, what's that? And then oh yeah. And then sometimes, those things can turn into little brainstorm sessions and stuff too. Mm-hmm. And so you don't get that more natural, or it's really easy to turn
water
to the person
cooler.
Next to you. Yeah, exactly.
The jam it out kind of vibe, or
exactly,
a mini jam.
Yeah, but for the most part, it seems like Discord is a really good way to collaborate on a game. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's cool.
I don't have many more questions. I don't know if anyone else had anything you wanted to touch on.
I have just one question. So we had a couple questions in our Discord as well, speaking of Discord, which we'll get to in a second. But I just wondered if you could talk a bit about the visuals, the artwork and stuff, because I actually thought the game looked beautiful. Every time I started it up, I was just wow, this game looks better than I remember. I don't know what you guys were doing. I think a lot of it is the lighting, because it's a 2D game, but adding that lighting, which I think you guys did in Guacamelee 2 as well. But it just seems like you took it to the next level. I don't know. Can you talk a bit about that and just, coming up with some next gen visuals, I guess?
Yeah. So yeah, we always use the same engine for all of our games. It's like a in-house developed engine, and uh, each game that we make, we're always trying to improve the visuals. And I think you, very astute, Sean, you noticed Guacamelee 2. That's the first time we put normal mapping into the world. So, when I don't know if I need to explain how normal mapping works, but basically, it's a good way to make something that flat look 3D, because you can simulate the way that light bounces off the surface in different ways, right? So you can make a tree that's just a flat thing look like it's round, because you can say like this side of it's this side of this object is pointing this way, this side of this object is pointing this way, so the light will behave realistically like it's a cylinder, right? So yeah, in Guacamelee 2 we added that. In this game we pushed that even further. I think like one of the things we always tried to do is like we always wanted to have movement on the screen so it didn't look static. So there's like many layers, like between the ground and like the camera, there's always like clouds or like mist or like things that are moving, or even objects in the environment that are moving. We did a lot of work with shaders. Maybe that's a little bit too technical as well, but like the water is all like simulated through shaders, and there's a lot of other effects like fire and stuff, particle effects, just trying to make the world feel as alive as possible. But I think the biggest jump was definitely the normal maps, like because you can make things look like really 3D, even though they're just completely flat objects in the world. I don't know, another thing that like on the art style of the game, initially, every time someone play tested the game, they would draw comparisons to Legend of Zelda, like the original Legend of Zelda. So we tried to start. So that feedback we didn't want to hear. Like we didn't, because it was setting expectations that this is like, if this is a Zelda game, then people are going to be expecting to go into dungeons and solve puzzles. And Zelda's much more gear-gated game than our game is, and so we wanted to try and push away from that. So it completely changed how we were designing the monsters and the biomes that we made in the game, like all the different environments. We tried to make the game feel not like Zelda, except for the starting area, which is like very grassy, and you start with a ranger. But once you leave that, it starts to feel like really, really different. So we were looking at things like Ren and Stimpy for like monster designs, or Garbage Pail Kids. They're trying to make things look like grosser or weird.
Yeah, the mermaid design was pretty cool. Like, I don't know if that was again part of trying to make that character like pop for people, but I was, when I unlocked it, I was like, oh, okay.
I thought it was a nice like subversion of expectations, right? Like, you unlocked a mermaid, it's going to be this sweet mermaid, and it's like the classic ghastly mermaid. I love that.
Yeah, like House in the Woods, yeah, or Cabin in the Woods, yeah.
Okay. So the Discord question. So we had a question from Blake who said, who made the decision to tap Jim Guthrie to score the game? These tracks are all bangers. How was working with him? Which I agree. The score is great.
I wasn't too involved in the music composition side of things, but Jim Guthrie's, he's a local Toronto musician, and he's worked on a few games with our good friends, Cappy Games, and so we were trying to figure out like how do we want to score this game. We wanted to work with someone new. Not that we didn't like the composers we worked with previously are all awesome, but we always want to try and work with new people. And so we reached out to Jim, and he was available, and he did an awesome job. I think basically we were just like, we want a song for this environment, we want a song for this dungeon, and Jim would play the game, and he would compose music that he thought fit well, and pretty much didn't need any feedback at all from us. It was always like really, really good right from the get-go. I know in the past, like with some composers we worked with, there's been a lot of like iteration because we don't feel the music is fitting the mood of this area quite right or whatever. But with Jim, it was always pretty much what he gave the first time was like pretty much what got into the game. So real professional for sure.
Cool. And then there's a question from Kirkbride. What projects is everybody working on currently, if they're allowed to say, or just be vague? So I think the question is like, what's next for Drinkbox? And, if you're allowed to say.
I can't say everything that we're working on right now, but, if you look at our history, typically we'll launch our game on the first set of platforms, and then it'll appear on other platforms. So maybe some of that is happening right now. But we're also looking at like expanded content for the game. We'd like to try and add some more some more to Nobody Saves the World. We've always released some DLC for most of our games too. And then we're also brainstorming new game ideas now. We have a pretty cool process, I think, where the entire team has, is able to pitch. We go, I think everyone on the team pitched like at least 3 game ideas. And then, everyone has a chance to explain their game idea. And then we have like rounds of voting, and like some of the more interesting ideas bubble to the top, and then we start talking about how can we combine some of the coolest parts of each idea. And that's what one of the things I'm doing right now is just like trying to figure out how to like pull the juicy nuggets out of the pitches and try and Frankenstein a game together from those. It's still pretty early in that process right now, but yeah, talking about what's
get
next.
Those juicy nuggets.
Definitely. Okay. Anybody have anything else? I think that was all I saw in the Discord. I don't know if anybody sent questions any other way, but
all right, let's get to the hate. I got some I got some nitpicks. One thing is, well, this is more like maybe a communication of the design process. So to start the game, it teaches you how to use that basically weapon wheel to switch your forms. And once you get more forms than that weapon wheel can hold, I found I completely forgot about them, because when you pull up that weapon wheel, nothing indicates how to add or swap out of that weapon wheel. Okay. And I found that like I would unlock a couple forms, and then I would just continue about my business, upgrading the forms that were on that weapon wheel. And then it was only kind of later on when I got to one of the dungeons where I needed something I didn't have on the weapon wheel, when I was like, how the hell do I get that guy I unlocked? Or how do I try the new character I got a little while ago? And I went into the menu and I found it, and I realized I could switch in the menu. And then I realized that it swapped into my weapon wheel. So that was one nitpick I had that I had trouble sort of like realizing to begin with, which wasn't a big deal, but it was kind of like a setback in the beginning of me trying out all the new forms I had just unlocked. And I don't know if you played around with that at all or have any comments on that. I don't know.
Yeah. So yeah, the quick swap wheel, that came in like, I don't know, pretty late. I mean, we didn't. Okay, this is a really, really complicated conversation. We had a lot of debates over how that thing worked, and there was, before it existed, everyone was asking for it, so we put it in the game. And the way it works is it's basically like your 8 most recently used forms, and we didn't want to make it too complicated. We didn't want to have customization. Like we talked about ways to do customization and couldn't come up with anything great. I think later on I played Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart and saw how they did it. And I'm like, okay, they did a really great job, because they have like 2 weapon wheels, right? Like they have so many weapons that they need to have 2 different wheels. But you could customize like where you want to put everything on, and they did a really good job of that. And I think if I had played that game earlier, maybe I didn't get my PS5 for ages, but once I played that game, I'm like, okay, that's a good way to do it. We could have done that. But we just wanted to keep it simple. So
yeah, don't do it the way Psychonauts 2 does it. That's not advice.
You can weigh in on the Psychonauts versus Ratchet and Clank debate whenever you want, Graham.
No pressure. That might be too personal.
They're both good games, right? But Ratchet
Which is the better game?
Ratchet and Clank is a bit better.
That is correct. Thank you.
The other thing, and I've heard people complain on the show about this, the fact that it doesn't pause time when it comes up. Which again is something like everybody who play tested the game wanted that, but we really didn't want people to be swapping forms mid combat, because when we allowed that, it just changed the way that people. Well, there's a few reasons. Like, first of all, Frank, I heard you say like in multiplayer you can't do that because you can't stop the other player's game while you're swapping. So, but in theory, you could just like disallow that in multiplayer. But what we found was if time slowed or paused when people had the weapon wheel up, then people would use the form wheel up. People would use the form wheel much more frequently. Even and even so much that they would not customize their forms. They would choose to switch forms rather than customize forms, which means they weren't doing their quests properly, right? Like they'd go into a dungeon, they'd be like, oh, it's a light damage type. Oh, I have one on my wheel. I'd switch to that one. They weren't trying to customize their forms as much to play the game that we wanted, the way that we wanted them to play. And, we debated this so many times. I found myself on both sides of that argument in different times, like, because I wanted it to stop time too. And then I watched a playtest and I'm like, okay, we can't let this, right? So, and then there was another one, and I think maybe this one is not as obvious, but like there's some like challenges that are like bullet hell challenges, and if you can just tap the form wheel to get through them, like like it's almost like slow motion when you do that. Also, another thing that we changed through playtesting was there used to be a huge delay when you swapped forms. Like there was a big animation, because again, we didn't want people doing it during combat, right? So it's like,
what about draining mana when you switch forms, or it's a mana cost to switch forms?
Yeah, that's another thing we could have done to punish. We tried doing like a time delay, because like if you're swapping during combat, you'll die. The mana one felt a little bit too punishing, and eventually we also removed the time delay too, because people would really, really complain about that. Like, they'd find themselves in some poison or something. Oh, I got to switch to the horse so I can get out of this poison, and then do the whole time delay, and then they'd die and get really upset. So, I guess eventually we settled on this thing the way it works right now, and it's still not perfect, but it felt like it was like the least worst that we could come up with. Yeah.
Sometimes that's all you can hope for. My last nitpick, actually kind of going back to what you talked, how you didn't want it to be Zelda puzzly. I actually found, I think during the middle, during the beginning and the end, I didn't have so much of a problem, but in the middle, I was finding the dungeons got a little repetitive, because I think the sort of like challenge aspect of them hadn't really kicked in. And maybe I had all my forms kind of like leveled up so they weren't as challenging. So it felt like I was just kind of like going through them. Maybe it was the order I took them in, because I did like a couple of the legendary dungeons, and then I did a whole bunch of sort of like the extra ones.
Yeah.
So maybe that was part of it. But I did find it kind of repetitive, and I was almost wishing that some of the powers could be used in more of a puzzle-like way. So did you guys experiment with puzzles at all, or was that always off the table completely?
The puzzles are mostly isolated to like the side quests, where you'll have to use like weird combinations, or like there's a good example is like the Thieves Guild, when you have to like break the things in a certain amount of time with the different abilities, and you have to try and figure out those. So those are the kind of puzzles that we ended up putting in the game. It's all about like customizing in the right way to finish a challenge quickly. The repetitiveness is something that we fought against like the whole last year of the project. Like we knew that those dungeons felt repetitive, and we kept like doing things to try and make them feel more distinct. Like we always had like the different art styles. Like all the dungeons are pulling from different pool. I don't know if this is maybe getting a bit into the weeds a bit, but all the dungeons are randomly generated. And there's like different pools of rooms that it pulls from depending on the dungeon. So, like we were adding new types of rooms. Like we have like rooms that are organic, rooms that are more axis aligned, and there's rooms with water. And so we tried to use different combinations of rooms for each dungeon. We made new enemies, and populated with new enemies. Hazards or something that came in pretty late. Like there was hazard rooms that were added, and the final room in every dungeon. Like it was a lot more repetitive, I guess is what I was trying to say. Mm-hmm. And every milestone we were trying to like make that better. And I mean, I think we would continue. We would have tried to continue to do that, like if we had more time. It was just kind of we ran out of time, but that was definitely something we were fighting against, like the whole last year of the project for sure.
I'm curious about and I don't know, maybe you talked about this when you were on originally when you guys announced the game, but the randomly generated element, like what was the thought there? Because to me, I would assume that's kind of like a replayability thing, like you could replay dungeons, or New Game Plus, you come back and the dungeon's different, which it sounds like you've already got different things applied to the dungeons as well.
Yeah.
But I would think that if you could kind of make each dungeon unique and not random, that might take away some of the repetitiveness as well.
Yeah. Well, and that's true. We had a lot of debates about this at the start of the project too. I think the main thing is we wanted to have a lot of dungeons in the game, and in order to do that, we didn't want to hand design like. I guess especially at the start of the project, we didn't know like how many dungeons are they going to be, how big are they going to be, how long should we make them, and when you make them random, it's a lot easier to change those things kind of on the fly. And one of the things we did was we made like, I think initially the dungeons were like twice as long as they were in the final game, and through playtesting we realized these dungeons, and it's also contributing to the repetitiveness of the game too, right? So it's like, oh, these dungeons, so I mean we tried to make them feel as differently as we could, like this one is a tower, so like there's a lot of floor changes, and so the structure can feel different. But I guess we wanted to have a lot of dungeons. We also wanted, if you died, that you could play it again, and it's not exactly like you can't, like, you don't know the path through the dungeon. It's always like you're always having to do a little bit of exploration when you're doing those things, and also just the ability to quickly tune like how big are the dungeons, how many enemies, like the pacing of each dungeon, the pacing of each area, how long will players spend in each area. You could just change a couple numbers and the game completely changes, right? We could double the length of the game by changing a few numbers, right? And so it just allowed for tuning of the pacing of the game much more easily, and the replayability also. That was another big one. Like, you can play this game, and every time it's different. You don't know what's around the corner. So
I would say the pace of the dungeons, like a single dungeon, is actually really good. Like, I like that it's shorter. I think if it was longer, like you were obviously like you found, it would be way too long and too repetitive and too punishing if you die and have to redo it all again. I like the short aspect of it, and having more short dungeons, gives you different options of what to do. I like that a lot.
Yeah, it ended up being that the longest dungeons were like the legendary dungeons, and Frank was mentioning before, the design decision about like locking the form, locking the quests. And the main reason we did that was because people were going into those legendary. We wanted to make those legendary dungeons hard, and people were going in and they were still focusing on their quests, not really paying attention to like the difficulty of the dungeon. So they would just like go into like the first legendary dungeon and just keep dying and trying again, but they're making progress on their quests, so they're like, okay, I guess I'm making progress, right? But we wanted it to like, no, here, make your best build that you can. It's not as clear in the first dungeon because you can't do customization yet, but there's 5 legendary dungeons total, right? So on all the rest of them, it's like, make your best build, put together anything you want, but you still have to adhere to the shields that you have to break. But other than that, don't worry about your quests. That's like one component of your build crafting we drop, and try and make the best thing you can and get through this.
My only nitpick of nitpicks is the map visibility, that you can't unlock the entire map. There's like, things that are always hidden. I kind of thought the dragon would be able to fly over and have easy access to everything, and it doesn't matter. It just drives like me crazy. And Elden Ring kind of does the same thing. Like, what? I can't see all of the map. There's like these areas I don't know what's there. That bothers me. But other than that, like, this is my last question. I would say the reputation of Drinkbox Studios is thus untarnished. I don't think you've made a bad game. That seems like a lot of pressure to me. Like the idea of, filmmakers that they have a perfect filmography, and then there's that one movie that I was like, oh, that's their worst movie. Like, are you feeling that pressure at all when you start to design new games? Like, we can't ruin our record here. We have a demand for perfection that may be unattainable.
Yeah, I guess that's always in the back of our minds. Like this game, I say a lot of people on the team are disappointed that we have like a 79 Metacritic and not an 80 Metacritic. And there's like one review in there that's 55, that if you read that review, I swear to God, that person didn't even play the game. Like, they played the first hour and they projected that hour for the rest of the experience. Like, they don't even mention the customization. Anyway, that's my little
Love it. Yeah. Let's call him out by name. Let's find that review and call him out by name.
Metacritic, do something about this.
Yeah, that 79 is really painful. But no, I mean, like that's the thing. Like, I don't know. This I also mentioned that this is our best-selling game on Steam, right? So like, when I get depressed about that 79, I'm like, but it's like the game is more popular than any other game we put out on Steam. So like, why am I obsessing about this thing? And I think maybe this time around, maybe we made a game that was more accessible. But anyway, but your question is like, does Drinkbox? Do we feel pressure to make
how aware are you of that knowledge? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think, the reason this game took us 3 years to make is because we didn't want to put it out until it was done, and it wasn't done for 3 years. And it's because of the quality level, right? Like we don't want to put out anything. I think like there are some companies that say this too, like Valve and Blizzard, and they don't announce release dates because they want the games to be good. Some of those companies, they cancel projects that are like they have had millions of dollars invested in them because they don't want to put out a bad game, right?
Yeah.
I don't think we would end up canceling a project, but but we do keep working on it until we're happy with it. And like that happened with this game, that happened with Severed. Severed was terrible for the longest time. It was very stressful. We didn't want to put it out, and until we were happy with it. And so sometimes that requires like drastic changes in direction during the project, and we're willing to do those things. Sometimes it requires cutting things like equipment systems that just aren't working, that are really painful to do. So yeah, we're really aware about like trying to put out like a game that we would be excited to play, like that we'd be, and I think you don't know you don't know a game is done until you've play tested with a bunch of people and they all seem like really happy with the game. So yeah.
Anyway, no pressure. You're perfect. Way to go. It is kind of weird too, because I remember that being a thing at Silicon Knights too. Like all the games got great reviews for the most part. It was always this like that Metacritic stuff, and review score was a huge focus, and all of a sudden, Too Human didn't live up to review score expectations, and it is a big thing in the games industry. Just to break the ice here a bit, let's go to Embers of Miram on Metacritic, which is around a 76, 77. That's where you want to be. You want to be green, but that means you're pushing boundaries. You're doing new things. So the 79 is exactly where you want to be. But let's read a user review from Attila the Hun. 0. It got a 0. Great game if you want to get bored out of your goddamn mind. It starts out promising with cute characters and all, and seems like a game that offers you some sort of deeper experience. But trust me, it's none of that. The game has a hard time deciding if it wants to be a platformer or a puzzle game. The mix between the two just does not work. There is no facial animation, so it feels very bland and lifeless. Honestly, you got to be some sort of major furry to enjoy this game, I think. The critic scores are ridiculous. Also, beating the game takes you 3 hours at most for a price tag of $19.99. LMAO. Get out of here. Just why, if you develop games, you have to develop a thick skin. So,
yeah, that's definitely true.
I've had it thrown at games I've worked on. I don't mind throwing a little, spice or heat the way
you scare me. I don't even want to go read some of the Citizens of Earth ones.
Of Double Fine and other things. Podcasting and developing games, you will develop a thick skin. All right. Well,
one weird stat before we move on. One weird stat: there are more on Metacritic. There are more Steam reviews or PC reviews than Xbox reviews for Nobody Saves the World, which I find interesting.
Yeah, considering it's Game Pass, right?
Yeah. Anyways,
I don't know how they decide. Yeah, the reviews get written, and I don't know how just Metacritic decides where to put them. But yeah, it feels a bit random sometimes.
Well, congratulations to you and the whole team. I think it's a great game, and you should be proud.
Thanks very much.
Absolutely.
Anyone else have anything to add with regards to Nobody Saves the World? Be sure to check it out on Game Pass and Steam for a very reasonable price. It's like 20 hours at least, not a stupid 3-hour $19.99 game. What are you, crazy? All right.
Definitely.
So I really enjoyed Embers of Miram.
I'm just drawing. I don't care. I mean, I'm glad that you liked it. The negative reviews don't bother me. I think it's funny. It's fine by me. So thanks for talking about the game. I hope it wasn't, the same questions you always get or too boring. But if people at home are like, that's a little too inside baseball or game development, apologies, but we have to go there. We have to ask those questions.
And you know what they should do if they don't like it? Leave a comment on the YouTube or join our Discord and yell at us there. We'll
Sure,
hear
yeah.
all your feedback.
YouTube.com/GameJunk. And the Discord link is there. Before we wrap up, we've taken a lot of your time already, Graham. Do you want to mention anything you've been playing? Or you always have cool recommendations and shout-outs for stuff. So,
Okay, yeah, sure. I've been playing Sekiro. Sekiro, I'm at the final boss. I've been at the final boss for a couple weeks, chipping away at it, half an hour at a time. I really wanted to beat Sekiro before Elden Ring came out, but that final boss is crazy. 4 phases, and it's very challenging, but excellent game. Really excellent game. I really never liked any of the FromSoft games. I tried Dark Souls and Bloodborne. I feel really stupid. I'll tell you a really quick story. Bloodborne. I bought Bloodborne at launch. I saw the crazy, amazing reviews. I fought the first enemy in Bloodborne. Killed me. It sends you to this other place, and I respawned, and I fought the first enemy again, and I died. I died like 4 times on that first enemy.
Sounds like my experience.
And I said, okay, I'm not playing this game. Couldn't beat the first enemy in Bloodborne. And then recently, like I was almost at the end of Sekiro, and I was like, I want to try Bloodborne again. What did I miss? The first enemy killed me again. I'm like, fuck, this really sucks. And then in that other area that it sends you, if you wander around, they give you weapons. And I didn't know that they give you weapons. And I got those weapons, and I went and I killed that first guy, like really, like one shot, he dies, right? I'm like, oh my God. So this game, I bounced off this game because it didn't teach me how to play it properly. Like
which
they
is
really
like the free pass from software gets, right? Like, go to the internet if you want to learn how to play this game.
I bought that game for whatever it was, $70 at the time, and I brought it back to the store like 2 days later, and I sold it back, and I felt really stupid. But Sekiro, it really resonated with me in a different way. That game it's really different from all their other games, and the controls are so tight. It's so the fighting feels so good. The sneaking, I really love it. I've heard Frank complain about the ledge grabs.
Sorry.
The ledge grab is not good.
No, it is not. But the just leaning that genre to an action genre rather than RPG is why it was the perfect gateway for me. And Neo was actually a gateway to that game. So
I haven't tried Neo, but
you might want to check out Neo.
The way that even the structure of that game, because like it's kind of like a tree structure where like there's branching paths where you open up new areas that you can choose which way to go, and you'll go down one branch and you'll get to a boss and it'll be really hard. You don't have to fight that boss though. You just go back, go this other branch. You're getting upgrades. You're exploring down, and then you come back to earlier branches and it's easier. I really really love that structure. It was really cool, and it feels a little bit like how I'm playing Elden Ring now too.
And that's what I said last week. It's like your analogy, but there's 50 branches you can go down at any given point. It's like that difficulty, like frustration, is alleviated by being able to explore wherever you want, whenever you want. And it's the perfect marriage of like that design and opportunity.
It feels very intentional too, right? Because you come out of the tutorial area, there's this guy on a horse who just kicks your ass, right? You can't, I don't think it's possible to beat that guy. Well, maybe if you're perfect, right? It feels almost like that first enemy in Bloodborne that I was talking about. But yeah, today I went back and tried to fight that guy again. He still kicked my ass, even though I can summon things now. And but it feels like, I like going back and trying things again, that are too hard. I really like the way that they did that. So I'm also playing Elden Ring. I'm not too far in, like level 17 or something. Horizon I picked up, but I've only played it for like an hour. I guess
I only ask one thing. When you get back to Horizon, when you get back to the flooded area, I just want you to text me and say, Frank, you're right. This is one of the worst designed things I've ever seen in a AAA video game.
Which flooded area? You mean the mine? The flooded mine?
No. You'll know. You'll know.
Okay. I did.
Like you go to this building. It's further into the story.
Okay.
And just
it's bad.
I'll anticipate that text.
All right. What else? Oh, I'm playing Divinity Original Sin 2 with my friend Brian. We've been playing that game for like 6 months. That game is enormous. I think we're only like halfway through it. Has any of you played that game?
No.
RPG?
I think I've played the first half an hour or so.
Okay.
Is that the one that starts on the ship, or is that Divinity 1? Okay.
Yeah, it's on a ship. That game is incredible. Like really, really good RPG, like classic RPG. What else? Oh, has anyone played? Did we talk about Inscryption? No, that came out after.
No.
Like, has anyone played
it.
Inscryption? That game is awesome. Definitely a mindfuck game.
I haven't gotten to the I've gotten to half of the mindfuck aspects. Not like I haven't had the payoffs for the mindfuck because I found some of the combat puzzles to be like I
Can't get past that fisherman.
I think like some of the bosses I'm just not getting.
Yeah,
I need to go back to it though. But at the same time, I started playing Dicey Dungeons, which is similar.
Yeah.
And Dicey Dungeons to me is like just hits my sweet spot better for that.
Yeah,
type of game.
That's a great game too. Yeah, I'd say definitely try and stick with Inscryption because like it's what is it? It's a card battler like Magic the Gathering, but then also there's this, you can stand up from the table and explore the room around you and solve these puzzles that are it's like an escape room kind of thing. And those all give you upgrades that come back into the game that help you, progress in the game too. So really, really, really cool design, that game.
And I know you love that. I still remember you recommending Pony Island.
The same developer.
First Game Junk appearance possibly.
Yeah. Pony Island was really bizarre. This it feels like he's getting stronger and stronger with each game, for sure.
Is it the same developer as Pony Island?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that. Okay.
Yeah.
Good pull, Frank.
Good develop. If I can recognize that element across both, that's kind of neat.
That guy's brain works differently than everyone else. He's really, really clever desiginer. I played Aperture Dusk Job today.
I downloaded that. I haven't tried it yet.
Oh yeah, it's 30 minutes including the credit roll, but it's a fun little game.
Is it by Valve?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's in the Aperture
Portal.
universe.
Yeah, I knew it was. I just wasn't sure if they gave someone permission to do it or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. It's really.
This is like the kind of game that comes with the Steam Deck, I think, right? Is that what it was intended for?
Free download. Yeah. Do you have a Steam Deck, Sean?
No, but I did pre-order.
Okay.
So I'm kind of like, should I wait to play it because maybe it's better on Steam Deck? I don't know.
Yeah. Did you get one, Graham?
I only the developer one. Yeah. So I just downloaded it today because I've been reading about it. But yeah, it's a cute little game. It feels good on the Steam Deck because I think it's built for that for sure.
Yeah.
How does the Steam Deck feel in your hands on a scale from?
Yeah, I want to hear
10?
more about the Steam Deck if you're allowed to talk about it.
Hold on, I'll just grab it. It's right here.
Oh, yes.
Juicy. Hands on.
Right. It's like a Switch, right? But it's thicker. It has this big fan that blows hot air into your face. Like it feels a little bit more heavy. But I think it's a really good piece of hardware. I think the battery life is not very good. Like 2.5 hours if you're playing games. So it's not great for like bringing on a plane or anything. But yeah, it feels good. There's buttons all over it. I don't know what game's going to use all these. Like there's these little trigger buttons on the back, and but I don't know. It's the screen is gorgeous. Half the games don't work. So I tried to play Inscryption on it, for example, and it just doesn't boot up. Other games, it just doesn't respond to inputs properly. Anything with a mouse, I tried playing Getting Over It on it. No, it can't do that. It doesn't really work. So I guess it's not perfect. That's for sure. Gets pretty hot, low battery life. Not every game works, but other than that, like the Aperture game is really good. I played a lot of Nobody Saves the World on it. It works quite well. So it's like some games, it's really well suited for it.
You're describing me, full of hot air, blowing hot air, low battery life, getting heated. I am the Steam Deck. I've only played Elden Ring. I just want to say I'm still loving it. 45 hours in, level 92.
Whoa.
92. Jeez.
Oh yeah, I did some grinding, some serious.
So I could say I'm still playing it. I'm at level 26. I still have not fought any of the major bosses yet. So I'm kind of just at that point where I guess I should probably start thinking about the first one. But it is interesting, and I'm curious what you think about this, Frank. Like I've been reading a lot of stuff online, like people saying, "Oh, hey, because you can go anywhere in this game at any time. Hey, there's these really powerful weapons, so you can just like start the game and immediately go and get this." And I've done a few of those, But the thing is, you still have level requirements and attribute requirements for a lot of them. But it feels like you could grab, some really powerful sword, just grind until you level yourself up to be able to use it. And then, the game would be a lot easier. So, I mean, I'm not,
it's easier, but this is kind of what I was referring to last week. It's like it's a series of balancing systems. There's
a lot of options.
Strengthening armaments and your stats on your base levels, plus like it all goes hand in hand. So like I've teleported to late level areas, like that's part of the game, and like I get ruined. So there still is a steep difficulty curve, but I do like that leveling is an option for people who stink at these types of games like me.
Yeah, like and that's the thing, like, yeah, there's no easy mode, but you can over level yourself. You can try to find really powerful weapons. You can get spirit ashes. You can get, I guess, is it spirits? Just the other things like the jellyfish
summons,
and stuff. Yeah. Summons. Like all those things help
they
you.
are ashes too. They're called a different type of ashes, but yeah, it's a really good game. I'm going to keep playing it until I am done it. And trophy guides are out. Powerpicks.com. I got to give my favorite trophy guides a shout. I can get a platinum without playing it multiple times. We
got to try to get a sponsorship going. A little payola. PowerPicks payola.
Love PowerPicks. All right. Anyone else have anything they want to mention?
Nope.
Okay. Graham, thanks again. Always a pleasure to see you. Anything you want to promote, Drinkbox wise, or yourself?
Sure, yeah. Follow Drinkbox on Twitter, Drinkbox Studios, or me on Graham_Drinkbox on Twitter. And please check out Nobody Saves the World.
Awesome. We loved it. Thanks. Good luck to all your future endeavors and games. I cannot wait to play them and verify an untarnished reputation as they get released. But thanks for listening. Next week, not really sure. Is there anything big this week?
I don't know. I think it's a pretty wide open month. I think nobody wanted to be close to Horizon and Elden Ring, so
I guess we'll see.
Gran Turismo did come out as well, so
I downloaded it. I've yet to play it, so we'll see what happens. Until next time, thanks for listening. Bye-bye.